A police officer walks up to your window, takes one breath, and says, "I smell marijuana." At that moment, most people think the search is already happening. They think they've already lost. And that's exactly when they start making mistakes that turn a traffic stop into a criminal case. They start explaining. They start admitting things. They start giving consent without even realizing they're doing it. But here's what most people don't understand. The next 60 seconds can matter more than the entire rest of the stop, because what you say and what you don't say can affect everything that happens next. I'm John Cannon, an Oklahoma criminal defense attorney, and I deal with stops like this all the time. I've seen cases where the officer found less evidence than the driver gave away with their own words. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what to say and what not to say, how to handle the consent question, what the smell claim does and doesn't legally justify, and how to protect yourself without turning a traffic stop into a criminal case. Let's start with the first mistake people make immediately. Step 1, don't panic, but lock in your mindset. The moment you hear "I smell weed," your body goes into panic mode. That panic is what gets people in trouble, because panic makes people talk. Panic makes people volunteer details. Panic makes people agree to things they don't even understand. And panic makes people think they can explain their way out of the situation. So your first job is simple. Slow yourself down. Hands visible, voice calm, no sudden movements. Then mentally commit to this rule. You are not there to convince the officer of anything. You're not going to explain your way out of this on the roadside, because the roadside is where cases get created. The courtroom is where cases get challenged. Step 2, watch your words, especially the first 10 seconds. Right after the officer says it, most people blurt out something like, "That's not mine. My friend was smoking earlier. It's legal. I have a card. I didn't even do anything." Here's the issue. Even if you think you're helping yourself, you're feeding the report. And reports don't get written like normal conversations. They get written for evidence. So the safest move is to keep your words tight and neutral. If the officer asks questions that are basically trying to get you to explain, you can say, "I'm not answering questions." Say it politely, say it calmly, then stop. You're not being rude, you're protecting yourself. Now here's what's coming next almost every time. Step 3, the consent trap and exactly what to say. After "I smell weed," the next move is usually, "Do you mind if I take a look? Go ahead and pop the trunk for me. Can I search the car real quick?" And the way it's asked is intentional. It's designed to feel casual, like you're supposed to say yes. This is where you need to be crystal clear. You say, "I do not consent to any searches." That's it. No speech, no argument, no sarcasm. If they push you with the line, "If you have nothing to hide," you don't debate. You just repeat, "I do not consent to any searches." Because here's the legal reality. If you consent, you just gave away one of the strongest arguments your lawyer could ever make later. If you don't consent and they search anyway, you preserve your ability to challenge it. Now that brings us to the part people misunderstand. Step 4, what "I smell weed" does and doesn't mean in Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, officers often use odor of marijuana as a reason to search. And whether that search holds up legally depends on a lot of details. Where you are, what exactly happened, how the stop unfolded, and what the officer claims they observed. But here's the practical truth for the moment you're in. Arguing on the roadside won't win this. Even if you're right, even if you have a medical card, even if the smell isn't coming from you or your vehicle. Your goal right then isn't to convince the officer. Your goal is to avoid giving them extra evidence and to protect your legal position for later. So instead of trying to win the debate, you do the smart thing. You stay calm. You don't admit anything. You don't consent. You don't interfere. Which leads to the next mistake. Step 5, don't try to hide, toss, or fix anything. Some people hear "I smell weed" and immediately start reaching under the seat, or they start shuffling things around, or they think they can quietly toss something, swallow something, stash something. That almost always backfires, because officers watch your hands for a reason, and those sudden movements become suspicious behavior or furtive movement in the report, which becomes another justification for the officer to escalate the situation. It can also create new charges that are worse than what you started with. So your rule is simple. Do not try to hide anything. Do not try to destroy anything. Do not try to outplay the moment. Hands visible, minimal movement. The more boring you are, the better. Now let's say you did everything right and they still decided to search. Step 6, if they search anyway, don't physically interfere. This is the part that's hardest emotionally because it feels wrong. But if an officer says step out or start searching anyway, you do not block them. You do not grab your belongings back. You do not argue your way into resisting. You do not escalate the situation. You say calmly one more time, I do not consent to any searches. Then you let it happen. Because your lawyer can challenge an illegal search later, but it's much harder to undo a resisting charge that gets added because things got physical. So you keep the stop safe, you keep it calm, and you protect the fight for later. Now, what if you had a medical marijuana card? Step 7. If you have a medical marijuana card, don't turn it into a roadside speech. A lot of people think a medical card is a shield that ends the conversation. It's not. You still have rules you have to follow. Amounts matter. Packaging matters. Where it's stored matters. Driving while impaired matters. So here's the best approach. If the officer asks if you have a card, you can provide it, but you do not start explaining your whole situation. You don't start talking about what you used, when you used it, who it belongs to, or why it's there. Because the more you talk, the more they write down. Show what you need to show when asked. Keep it short, stay calm. Now here's the last part, because sometimes, despite doing everything right, you still get arrested. If you're being arrested, the stop is no longer about handling it smoothly. Now it's about protecting yourself from statements. Officers may keep talking. They may say things like, help yourself out, just be honest, this is your chance to explain, don't take the bait. You say, I want a lawyer, then stop, shut up, lawyer up. No small talk, no explanations, no trying to be reasonable. Because a lot of cases are won or lost on what someone says after the cuffs went on. Don't do their job for them. So, if a cop says they smell weed in Oklahoma, stay calm and slow down. Don't explain, joke, or volunteer details. If asked to search, say, I do not consent to any searches. Don't hide or destroy anything. If they search anyway, don't interfere. Repeat your non-consent once and stay calm. If arrested, say, I want a lawyer, and then go silent. Those steps can be the difference between a bad stop and a real criminal case. Remember, shut up and lawyer up. Now, if you're watching this, there's a good chance you're worried about what happens when an accusation turns into something much more serious. Because in Oklahoma, domestic violence allegations can move fast and the system gets aggressive early. So your next step is my video, How to Beat a Domestic Violence Case. In that video, I'll walk you through what the state has to prove and defenses that actually work, and the early mistakes that can make a winnable case harder than it needs to be. Click that video now, because the people who protect themselves early usually have more options later. Go watch that next, and I'll see you over there.